All right, and I think the other person we're missing is Jason, but we've got enough here to go ahead and get started. Let me share my screen. All right, everybody see my screen okay?
Yep.
All right, fantastic. Okay, so I know most of you, we do have some new members on, and then we have some folks from Ochsner who are listening in for the first time as they're starting to get into looking more in the clinical space for automation as well. So welcome to you guys also. I will just say to the members, we've had some really good success. We've pretty much doubled in size over just the last few months with the number of members, and that's fantastic. Makes it a lot easier on scheduling these things, but it also gives us you know, a lot more ideas. We've now have representation from the pharma group with Karen from Grain RX, and then also Benjamin, who was at Mass Mutual, recently left there and went to Vertex. So that's fantastic. We're getting more on the nursing side. Angie Kaiser is from Children's in Dallas. She unfortunately was not able to make it. She might join a little bit late. And then we've got Josh from Common Spirit, who heads up their virtual health and telemedicine. So I feel really, really excited about this. We've got a broad area of healthcare now being covered. That's fantastic. For anyone who might be listening to this a little bit later, just an introduction as to why we're here, what we're doing. I'm Jeff Hatfield. I lead Ashland Health. Ashland Health is the healthcare vertical for Ashland Partners. Ashland is the leading systems implementer and partner to UiPath. Jason should be joining from UiPath very soon, but I think everyone's familiar with UiPath. They are the leader in the RPA and intelligent automation, hyper automation space. We decided to partner with them years ago because of the many reasons, but because of the maturity of their platform and the ability to develop very rapidly and in a component type manner. And we felt that was going to be the best solution to help drive more automation within the healthcare space. So over the years, Jason, who's the global healthcare lead for UiPath, we've built out their healthcare vertical as well. But we've always felt like something was missing in the clinical space. So as we all know, there's a lot of automation that's been happening in rev cycle, finance, accounting, HR, supply chain, and so on, but just not a lot done in the clinical space. So earlier this year, we formed CIAC, that's the Clinical Intelligent Automation Council. And this group gets together 2 or 3 times a year, and we talk about things that we're experiencing, things that are happening in the clinical space in healthcare. What types of opportunities do we see that we want to go ahead and try to get some automation wrapped around? We take those ideas, and between myself and my team and Jason's team, we started doing design work. We've got several of those to show to you today and others to discuss. So I want to go through that. And Chris Rogers is on. He's on my team. He's a senior business analyst. Worked with him for many years. And I'll help. He can introduce himself and give more on his background in a minute. But the idea is, if we can come up with these ideas here, we go ahead and make the investment to do the design. If this group thinks that what we've designed, the automation is worthy of going out to the market, we'll go ahead and build that out and start having that available. So that's the purpose of CIAC. Any questions or other comments there? Okay, great. As I said, this is our current member list. You'll see that it has indeed grown nicely over the past few months. I'd like to probably get maybe another 8 or 10 folks in this and then kind of cap it off. I don't want it to get to where it becomes overly big and diluted. So for today, let's go around. Let's do some quick introductions because not everybody knows everybody now. We've got new members, and just tell everybody who you are, what you do, and what brings you to CIAC. And Karen, we'll start with you.
Oh, there we go. I thought I was on mute. I'm sorry. Hi, everybody. Karen Babilon. I'm an RN by trade. I work here at Green RX. My history in informatics has been very deep and very wide. Started out in the hospice realm, working with their EHR system, and then transitioned over into the PACE and skilled nursing arena. Worked there and helped them transition, worked with the pharmacy hand in hand to work on integrations and pieces with skilled nursing, assisted living. And then I went into consulting for healthcare, more on the payer side of things for a little while, and then came back over here to Green RX, where just getting started with RPA and entertaining that, and really excited to be a part of this committee, getting in on the ground and seeing how we can work together to really take healthcare to the next level.
Well, thanks, Karen. Bimal?
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. I'm Bimal Desai. I'm a general pediatrician and the Chief Health Informatics Officer at Children's Hospital Philadelphia. I oversee the clinical informatics and digital health programs, which includes telemedicine, remote patient monitoring, work a lot with our Epic and EHR team as well. And, we're not currently using any of the hyperautomation tools, but it's an area that's of interest to me. And so I'll be learning a lot from many of you.
Thanks, Bimal. I already mentioned Angie. She heads their solution delivery and innovation at Children's Health. Right now, and this is one of the ones that we're working on designing with her, she is working on a use case which is automating the therapeutics authorization renewals. Many of you probably understand what is entailed there, and it's very time consuming because every time you have another treatment on one of the kids, you have to go back and round up a ton of information in order to get that authorization approved again. So that's a great one. Design has started there, and if she's able to join, we'll let her get into more about that. As that design does get completed, if we don't get to show it today, I'll add it to this when I do have it and send it out to everybody. Josh.
Hello, everybody. My name is Josh Lystra. I'm a registered nurse by trade with a history in PACU, ED, and urgent care. I was a clinical informaticist for over 5 years in the Pacific Northwest before I moved to my current role as a program manager for virtual health. I have a focus on ambulatory and population health management within that sphere. I have a history with experience actually with implementing robotic process automation actually at bedside in the ambulatory environment. Worked successfully with the Epic EHR to implement robotic process automation, automating diagnoses, documentation, and orders for providers at bedside for specific dimensions of care related to quality ACO metrics. So that's kind of my background, and I've had the opportunity to collaborate with Jeff in the past. And he brought me into this sphere because I certainly am interested not only in the work that's ongoing in your areas, but also seeing if there's opportunities to automate in the virtual health space.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Let's go to Brian Busbee.
Hey, I'm Brian Busbee. I'm Piedmont's Director of Clinical Analytics, and I've long worked in the population health, ACO, care management, revenue cycle management side of our organizations at Piedmont, and then previously at Wellstar. We started our RPA program a little over a year and a half, almost 2 years ago. And a lot of our early focus was on like med staff credentialing, but recently we've started using our bots in support of our population health team to try to get more real-time insights and support. And now we're going to try to help them scale out their engagements with patients, try to help them use bots with those different patient engagement activities to try to manage the 200 or 250,000 at-risk lives we have. So really excited to be a part of this group. I thought that a whole bunch of folks doing similar work, trying to figure out how to use automation to help patients was something I wanted to be a part of.
Thank you. And Martyn.
Yeah, hi, Martyn Knowles. I am a vascular surgeon at UNC in UNC Rex Hospital in Raleigh, the chair of surgery there. And I am also the chief medical officer of a company, OpFlow, that works with data analytics and machine learning around operating room efficiency with instrument trays, consumables in the OR space. And so happy to be here.
And Jason Warrelmann.
Good afternoon, everyone, and sorry for my tardiness. For those I haven't met, Jason Warrelmann, I lead our global healthcare practice at UiPath. Many of you use our products, some of you don't. But either way, my purpose here is really to be a contributor and help break down the barriers that we're seeing and really innovate. We have a very strong innovation culture here within our organization, and we like to solve problems. And clinical operations, especially at-risk lives and really human population, we focus on that more than the administrative and the operational work, which typically automation is placed in. So I really appreciate you allowing me to participate in this panel today.
And Chris.
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Chris Rogers, Senior Business Analyst and Healthcare Consultant with Ashling Health. And let's see, my history, my background for healthcare. After 11 years in the military, I transitioned out into my civilian life and started at Mercy Health out of St. Louis as a burn technician in burn ICU. Transitioned to clinic administration, and then eventually worked my way into revenue cycle. I became a director within revenue cycle. And then I met Jeff several years ago, and he brought me over to the robotics side. So now I work hand in hand with Jeff. Glad to meet y'all.
And we also have, you see, we have Hobie, Emily, and Daniel, all from Ochsner. As I said, they are kind of wanting to ramp up their automation program. Had a meeting with them last week and felt like this would be great for them to kind of listen in. And hopefully we can bring them on as members sometime soon. So welcome, Ochsner.
Thank you, Bob.
Loving the mustache, Hobie. Last time I saw you, you didn't have it. Way to go.
Appreciate it.
All right. So from our last session, you'll see we came up with a lot of use cases and potential solutions. Since then, we've been diligently working through them. The ones with the green check marks are ones that we do have designs in, and we actually, I believe, have some demos in some cases. Today, we're going to go through the quality issue predictions. We're also going to go through, and this one's fairly complex. This will take a little bit of time to go through this one, but I do think it's very important. The other one that we're looking at today is automating registry completion. This one's more simple, more straightforward, but again, I know a lot of systems, either they're spending a lot of time on this or they don't have bandwidth to spend as much time on it as they would. And we feel very strongly that these national registries are things that are of very, very high importance. And we also think that there's ways that the data can be used better and more quickly within the systems themselves. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. In terms of reducing clinician administrative tasks, there's been a lot of things that have been done on this. Jason, not to put you on the spot, but what I was thinking about for this group would be very interested in hearing more about are the LPN digital assistants that you all have built out. Can you talk to that briefly?
Yeah, in terms of using combined NLP, Jeff, is that what you're referring to, or just the full?
No, the nursing digital assistants that we have.
Oh yeah, definitely. One of the key things about automation is it's a great way of synchronizing a composable health system, right? APIs are great. We all know that. But just sometimes there's data you can't get to, or there's a lot of routine that's needed to feed these processes. And, especially when you start working at the nurse level, they need tools, they need better experiences, quicker ways of serving the patient. So we've seen a lot of use of really low code engagement. Think of it like an application, right? Most people don't realize that with our platform, you can build a low code application, and that's automation that drives all the back end. No need to build a data lake, no need to build all these advanced rules, no need to create this heavy ITR infrastructure. It's a low code application driven by robots. So we're seeing that in combination. I heard Joshua talk about Epic, right? I can get data out of Epic, but I can't put data back into Epic very easily. So they're doing things like quality control, sepsis monitoring. We've seen some instances of driving work in basket workflow. Where's my order? Where's my blood test? So some of them are small turnkey problems like that, all the way to more advanced ones. Right now, we're seeing a lot around clinical research and, looking at details in clinical records and pulling out and making summary determinations so that the clinician can make the next step recommendation. So all those are kind of different, what we would like to call, we call them PALs, practical application layers, that we're seeing put into production with nurses today.
Obviously, with the situation with nursing around the country, these are extremely timely and very, very important. So we're excited to see some of those get rolled out. And if anyone's interested, we can talk more on that also. The last one then, and again, this is one that Angie's working on, the infusion drug authorization renewal. Again, if she is able to join, we'll jump into that. But for now, we want to go into the quality piece, and I'm sorry, we've got National Registry up first. I'm going to turn it over to Chris. And Chris, if you would walk us through this.
Sure. You want to flip me to the next slide here. So I'm sure everyone here is familiar with national registries, and they're based on different diagnoses and such. And my experience when I worked for Mercy, the responsibility of entering data into these registries was at the department level. And sometimes it would be a nurse, sometimes it was just whoever could handle inputting the data. There wasn't a lot of importance placed on this process, and it was, like I said, usually disconnected, discombobulated, and inconsistent. But when you talk to physicians and other clinicians about the registries and the importance of the registries, I get a sense of how important these registries truly are. So we felt that by automating the process, it would bring it to a more centralized process, and it would be more consistent, more timely, and much more accurate. So next slide, I'll kind of walk you guys through just a very high-level basic process workflow diagram. So the idea behind automation is we would centralize that information either into a shared folder or a work queue or something like that, where the bot can access. So then the bot would be triggered based on the client's need, the client's schedule. And so the bot would go to that centralized area, whether again a work queue or a network folder, and just verify that the data is there. If it's not there, the bot's going to send out an exception and send that email or however that communication is sent. But if the information is there, the bot picks it up, and then we go into a validation process here. So is the patient already in the registry? If the patient is not, we need to validate whether the patient truly needs to be in that registry. And then has the patient's information changed if they are in that registry? If the information hasn't changed, no need to update. But if the information has changed, again, we're going to go to that validation process, and then determine, is validation required? And so we're going to look at the diagnostic information, make sure that that diagnostic information is what fits inside the criteria for that registry. And then again, we've determined if that information is correct or not. If everything fits into that space, we're going to upload that data into that registry. Actually, it goes into Orchestrator. This is all done within Orchestrator first. And then we're going to build that list that needs to be uploaded. And then once that list is all uploaded, if we can utilize API, we'll push all that to API. If we can't use API, then we'll go UI and just go into that registry portal and update the information that way. And then the idea, there's a second phase to this, that we would want to provide some kind of data analytics BI to report back to leadership, just to see how the process is going. Any questions on this? I know that was pretty high level.
Yeah, I think Chris, at several points throughout this, if we've got the bots that are handling this data for the registry, we can apply multiple types of analytics. These things are used many times in training. The information here goes back to the surgeons, the physicians, the nurses, whatever the case might be. That's another area that could be sped up so that as soon as it's being reported, it's analyzed and it's sent back out, so we get near real time information on the results of key procedures or the results of medication or whatever the case might be. Correct?
Right. Yeah, and for the the specialty physicians, surgeons who rely heavily on the medical information coming out of those registries, we can also have the bot retrieve that information as it comes out. We could set it up to where maybe the physicians can go in and request specific information, and bots can retrieve that information, that data, whatever that source information is, bring it back to those physicians. There's a huge amount of possibility within this realm that you really can't assign a dollar amount to it on the surface. But if you just look at the holistic approach here and the benefit of it, you can kind of maybe formulate a dollar amount to associate with this, improving patient care, improving your healthcare organization's knowledge within that specialty. There's so much benefit to this process.
Chris, I don't want to take us too far down into the weeds, but I just want a general understanding. Is this solution geared around an internal network, or is this more a global information that is out, for public knowledge, like CCE and things like that, that it's gathering this data from?
Yeah, it's the latter. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Awesome.
Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
Just a question. In the steps where it's validating data, like where it's comparing to some pre-existing diagnosis, where's the source of truth? Like, is that coming from the operative record? I'm just trying to understand. I understand you're trying to populate the registry with patient data, but where's that source of truth coming from?
I guess it would depend on the specialty. Like, let's take oncology, or for instance, usually the source of truth is within that treatment plan and any documentation connected to that treatment plan. And it would really be, for us to determine the source of truth, we would sit down with the client and go through their EHR and say, okay, where do you document that diagnosis? Where is that discrete field, and where is it? We're not going to be going through different progress notes and all that and trying to determine, because we know that progress notes can vary from physician to physician, and there's usually no standardization to how they document. Whereas if I'm very well versed with Epic, and in Epic there is a discrete field for that diagnosis and for any failed therapies and any step down drugs or step up or however, all of that is detailed in discrete fields within that treatment plan. So as long as we can identify those discrete fields to validate that information and the data that is required by that registry, it really shouldn't be that difficult.
Thank you.
So we would have this automation built, but then from one system to the next, or even one discipline to the next, we'd have to train the bot, right, Chris, on where to go, what to look at.
Yeah, and it's pretty simple. You know, once we have that basic reusable component created, now we're just pointing the bot where to go.
Right.
And so we just have to do that discovery with the client, determine where those discrete fields are, and point the bot in that direction.
So, Chris, from this flow here, what's the experience that you're thinking? I mean, this is built in a very back-end unattended way. Are we thinking this is something that automatically happens so that it completely alleviates the work, or something that we're doing in combination with the clinician, allowing them to make the final submission?
Again, I think that would vary from specialty to specialty, and the complexity of the data that's required from each registry. If it's very simple data that's needed, then I think this could be a full-on unattended process in the background. But if there is data that needs to be validated by a human, by a clinician, then yeah, it would have to be either attended or unattended, gathering that data and dropping it into a work queue or some kind of an action center or action form, and have that human validate and then pass it back to the bot, and then the bot takes off.
So not 100%, but the 95%, the
Correct.
research and administrative weight of the process and not the clinical outcome.
Correct.
I've seen some registries, especially oncology, where there is a clinical observation required at the end that you're just not going to get from, an excrete data field, right?
Correct. Yeah.
But we can fill in the rest, or summarize it or paraphrase it into, like you said, maybe an action center or a form that just allows you to put that one observation in. Then the rest, to your point, can be completed in a very quick order and validated.
Right.
So that, the worst thing that we could have is a clinician going back and checking the robot's work. That's kind of, counterproductive, but it happens all the time. So, that is some, again, different per registry, I'm sure, but it is a unique aspect that I see quite often.
Yeah.
I would also think and again, this is going to be customer specific and customer wish list, but you really do have to think about the quality initiative and the human validation. Is this something that you're pulling into your medical record and absorbing as your own documentation, or is this something you are utilizing and verifying? It's not always a great assumption that if you're pulling data, especially from an outside source, that it is something that you agree upon or you're taking into your plan of care for that patient.
Right. And I guess to your point, we could take this into a more hyper automated process to where we are utilizing RPA with AI and doing that validation with Action Center or action forms, and then creating that machine learning model that, based on the collection of that data and creating a historical model, we can increase that confidence level at some point, through that validation. And then when the client says, okay, we are comfortable at at 92% or 95%, then the bot can just take it and run with it, or something like that.
Great points, great conversation. Let's move on to patient quality monitoring.
So patient, wait, this is post-acute, so this is more of a home monitoring.
No, it was supposed to be both acute and post.
Okay, okay.
Did I mix them up?
So, yeah, post-acute is when they go home
Right.
or to a SNF or something like that. But okay, so I'll go into let's see, this is the inpatient monitoring, basically taking that hospital census. And again, this is scheduled, or we could make it triggered. When a new patient enters that census, the bot picks that patient up and puts them into that working data table or work queue. So the idea here is a bot will be monitoring. Actually, this is the dispatcher. Sorry, let me explain this correctly. So this is a dispatcher performer bot approach. So we're going to have a dispatcher that is managing that census, taking it from the EHR and putting it into Orchestrator and keeping a real-time data table of those patients who are in-house, and then pushing that information to a work queue where now the performer bot is then picking that information up and basically monitoring each one of those patients based on their diagnosis and morbidity or comorbidities. And those ranges of acceptability would be of course within that configuration table, and that bot is constantly monitoring that census. And anytime a patient falls outside of that range, and we can make that a hard range, or we can make that kind of a grayscaled, okay, if they start creeping out by X number of points, we need to alert the care team. Or if they're in this gray area, it's okay, but let's monitor. And so it can get pretty specific to the what type of hospital acquired condition we're monitoring for. And I think, I don't want to say an easy one, but a go-to would probably be sepsis, because we can see that through labs. If that patient is starting to crash, and also other means of monitoring that patient as well. So I think I pretty much went through this one, right? Everything gets pushed to the census work queue.
Yep.
And then the next one, so here the performer bot's gonna pick up the next patient, read the hospital census or actually they're gonna read the whole census to memory and then go out to the EMR and then pull up each patient. And we'll have to configure the bot to look for specific documentation, specific indications within their chart based on what it is that we're going to have that bot monitoring for. And so then the bot will go into their chart and then look for any required chart data that exists. So what that means is, so the last time the bot was in that chart, it looked at labs from 10 a.m. So now the bot goes back in there. Do we have newer labs, more recent labs that were maybe run at noon? Yes. Okay, great. We're going to go forward. If not, then no need to go any further with that patient. And then the bot will look at, so if yes, there is new data, then the bot will read that data and then see if those levels exceed the specified criteria. If yes, notify that care team right away. So, and the notification, that's something that we work out with each client, how they want that care team to be notified. Whether that's going to be through some kind of an action center monitor or through email, through a page, however. And then the bot will then update action center as needed and then go to the next patient or go back to the orchestrator bot tray and sit and wait to be triggered. And then here's another one that I know I think most healthcare organizations struggle with, is that discharge of patients. And if they're not discharged correctly, you start getting a lot of those short stay denials. And so if there's usually a lot of confusion between the discharge nurse and the physician who's doing the discharge, and it should be outpatient status but the physician keeps flipping it to an inpatient status or whatever. So by having a bot go in there and review that patient's chart just before they're being discharged and making sure that the discharge order is correct, discharge status is correct, and any the post-acute care plan is also entered. It's just another safety net to help reduce those short stay denials and also make sure that the patient is being discharged correctly.
And we also want to compare this to all the data and information that the bot has been reviewing during the patient's stay, and compare that to what the discharge orders are, and make sure that that coincides and something's not getting missed in that discharge,
Right.
based on the diagnosis and the procedures and whatever else has to happen. And then finally, this should be this is the post-acute.
Okay, so this one here, I actually worked on a use case automation for this one. So every healthcare organization, the goal is to reduce the amount of time, the inpatient time, and get them home where they're more comfortable, where they can start recovering. But we also want to make sure that we're not sending them home too soon and we have to readmit them. So by automating the home monitoring process and interfacing with that home monitoring device, bots can send that real-time information as they're monitoring that data that's coming out of that monitoring device. So let me start from the beginning here. So we're going to read the home monitoring patient list to memory. So the performer bot's pulling that from that work queue, navigate to the monitoring device interface, review the patient's vitals against specified criteria. Vitals exceed specified limits. If yes, notify the care team. If no, go ahead and update the action center as needed. And again, this is another one of those where we can create a display where we set up an action center and we can color code all of these patients. So it's a quick visual, but also utilize other means of notification to the care team as well.
So Chris, with this, I'm looking at navigating to the monitoring device. I think of things like future smart on fire protocols that are coming for a lot of programs. In kind of this vision, do you see the robot tapping that as a more secure way of kind of triggering? Because it's a more secure channel of data than going to, because a lot of these interfaces are separate web tools, right? Hopefully they weren't brought down due to the malware that kind of was going around, but that's always the challenge. It's different interfaces.
Yeah, and that's why this is so high level. It really depends on, who does that healthcare organization use for their home monitoring devices, and how do we interface with that device? And so yeah, this is pretty high level.
Yeah, I think of like Philips. They have APIs, but most organizations are having to go into the Philips web application to get the details and monitor it in comparison to the clinical chart, which winds up becoming cross data entry.
Yeah,
Ben, the other observation, just because we've been exploring some of this remote patient monitoring space recently, and I think what we found is that almost all of the device manufacturers, as well as the RPM vendors, will include some alerting capability. It's just simple rule-based stuff, like if their heart rate is greater than X, then trigger a notification to the care team. And so I'm wondering, is there a way to distinguish what the robot can do from what those simple conditional rules can do? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
because they're gonna, I think someone reading this would just say, well, I can do that today in my
The question is what
GE monitor or whatever.
So there's Bimal from inside the organization, like we've talked about insights to action, right? How do I take an insights to an alert and actually take a high level action? Because, I always say, data is good and we're in the world of data, but it's actually made more work for people because we have more transparency to the problems. So is there a number of high level actions that need to take place once that alert comes through. So could we actually build the automation so it takes that high level alert? And I think of, similar to acute care, there's a lot of organizations, some hospitals do it, some don't, where you have the, the box in the sky. It's really kind of a room with remote monitoring on patients, and they're looking across all the patients. And when all those vital signs dip down, they push the red button and then everyone goes to that. It's kind of like a crash cart exercise, right? But it only takes 20 minutes to validate all that patient's information to even say, should I get the whole hospital running towards this patient's bedside? Mm-hmm. And then there's another monitor that's failing. So it's not the automation to alert it, but the automation actually accumulates it and then sends the hospital into action without making that full alert. So the question is, can you put those sort of activities in there as a next stage action?
Yeah, the idea is to catch that patient when they first start declining in health instead of waiting for them to fully decline. And so a lot of those alerts are set up on like standardized protocols, whereas we can make it more specific to the patient based on their, the US has a lot of sick patients with comorbidities where there's a lot of influence there. And, what kind of drugs are they on? Are they on heavy blood thinners? Are they an extremely non-compliant diabetic who's, morbidly obese? And, so we can take all those things into consideration and make that monitoring process much, much better, taking it outside of that standardized realm.
I think it's interesting how you pulled together the dispatcher to performer, right? So do you see this in more of a microservice way, where it starts with the dispatcher pulling the reconnaissance together, and then it's individually triggering these different robots that are in line, I think, Karen, you said, to the quality control program, because a lot of these are quality control program items.
Yeah, so a lot of these large organizations are centralizing their home monitoring and even their inpatient ICU monitoring. And so that was kind of the idea of we would use a dispatcher to pull together multiple locations, patients throughout multiple regions, and pull it into a centralized queue, and then use multiple performers, maybe based on region, facility, location. It can be broken up and basically emulating basically what the healthcare organizations are doing now with their staff.
That makes sense. I mean, I don't know if everyone here knows the dispatcher performer methodology and automation, but essentially what they're saying is, instead of having an automation that pulls all the analysis and then performs the action, they have one robot that does all the front end analysis, and smaller robots and then take action off of that data. So it actually makes the orchestration of the automation faster and more flexible. So if you need to make a change to, let's say, this specific solution, you don't need to make a change to the whole automation, just as one piece of that performance. So it's a very, when we talk about scale, it's a scaling concept.
Right.
So any other comments or questions around this use case?
The only thing I have to say is, looking at this one as a post-acute performer, we're talking about home monitoring systems. We're talking about after they've been discharged from the hospital to home and monitoring that case. So I think there's a lot of variables that could be into this, depending on the home healthcare. Are they going home healthcare? Are they going hospice? Are they going to a skilled nursing facility? Where is that monitoring taking place? And what is the escalation of the notification going back to, the hospital or the physician or the provider who's really, carrying that torch of being responsible for the care at that time. Mm-hmm. And I think it would add a lot of value to, add in those standardized treatment plans and monitoring protocols into this, as well as, like you'd said, the the personalized, if my weight normally fluctuates as a CHF, 5 pounds, every 3 days, well, you want to be more alerted whenever I'm going up to 8 pounds or 10 pounds of a weight loss difference. So I like it from a high level, but I just think there are a lot of variables in between, especially for the post-acute, that are going to be challenging.
And Jeff and I did talk about that. We kind of got into, it's, every single patient is so different. And then on top of that, how could we make this even more valuable, more beneficial? And, to your point, monitoring that whole treatment plan after they've been discharged, and considering where they're going. And then also following up, did they go to their follow-up appointments? Did they get their meds from the pharmacy? Have they gotten their recent labs? We can fold all that into this, just monitoring. And basically, the bot is an assistant to that care team. And but yeah, there's a lot of complexity to this as well.
The other side benefit of this as well, I mean, this does not have to be just monitoring patient risk. That's what we've laid this out as, but at the same time, it could be monitoring quality of service. Right. So this is actually, that's where the idea really started for me and Chris, was in the quality audits that happen and the amount of time it takes to pull that data together. We thought, why not have a bot that's just monitoring that in real time? So in addition to just how's the patient doing, how's the provider doing? Are they adhering to our level of standards that we have to abide by in order to get full reimbursement, for example? So there's several things that can go on here. One of the things I always ask about this, Chris, is we know that, and I think you started to mention, the EHRs, they do have alert and especially for the ICU, they've got alert monitoring, things like that. How does this fit into that or complement that?
So the healthcare organization that we actually automated this for, they came to us and said, hey, our biggest problem right now is fatigue. Our nursing staff, we've got 2 people in there monitoring, and they've got bells and whistles going off. They've got, colors are changing like crazy. They've got phone calls coming in. They need help. They need some type of an assistant. And throwing more bodies at it isn't going to solve it. So what we need is a way to automate this and create a more earlier detection. And instead of getting these alarms and notifications when the patient's already crashing, we need to identify these patients way before they start crashing, so or declining. So that was the main reason that we automated this process, was to help with that fatigue.
All right, so we'll take these and we'll start putting together a plan on how to get these developed, and then as we do more and more of these, we'll have to be thinking about, all right, how do we share this? How do we make it available? How do we build out an asset library? Things like that. So that'll be still to come for everybody. We'll keep you posted. I want to shift over in the last few minutes that we have and talk about, are there any other types of use cases that you all have been thinking about that we want to kind of throw into the mix? And Josh, I know last time you and I talked, you were starting to kind of put together some ideas from the virtual health space. Is there anything pop in mind you'd want us to add to our list?
Yeah, so there's been some recent research in regards to patient experience being diminished this year compared to last year as far as telemedicine. So there's a big focus on patient care experience. One of the things that we talk about with good intention is that the implementation of virtual care visits is supposed to be conducive to not only the patient but the provider, well, there's been a lot of undue pressure put on providers and the clinical care teams in regards to education and training and also outreach to that patient to ensure that that virtual visit is streamlined. One of the things that we're currently working on, and it's based off of a Harvard Business Review article that Johns Hopkins put out, was the identification stratification of patients who are in need of telemedicine outreach ahead of time. And so formulating a telemedicine technical risk score, again, pulling that data in, and then from there, providing outreach to those high-risk stratified patients that may need extra care in advance of that virtual visit, to have that opportunity to provide outreach either via SMS or a communication to either a third party or internal vendor that can actually provide services, potentially 24 hours in advance of that visit, so that there's a white glove service for those individuals, so that it's not put on like a doctor like Dr. Desai, who's having to instruct his patient on how to facilitate a Zoom call or whatever other technology they're utilizing. So I think that that's kind of one of those areas where I would be interested in seeing how we can potentially automate that process to go through, identify those patients who are at risk based off of a set criteria, and from then there extract that data and put it into meaningful, actionable terms, as far as either in the form of a communication directly to that patient, utilizing existing discrete fields of data for outreach, or to a third-party vendor who can provide that service as well.
So if I'm hearing it correctly, Josh, the situation is there's a virtual visit happens, and once the provider gets into that situation, suddenly they realize, gosh, there's all these other things that could have been taken care of ahead of this time, so that we make this visit more meaningful and productive.
Well, or just the fact that the patient not having experience with virtual video visits historically, or the technology and the use of it, is going to compound the provider's daily schedule, because they're going to run late. So it's a means of streamlining that experience and process for the clinical care team. So the burden's not on the clinical care team. The burden's removed from the clinical care team as far as giving that technical dress rehearsal or that technical rundown of education, so that it's not on, the focus is not on the at the time of the visit is not on that technical component. It's on the provider actually taking care of the patient.
I'll second that. Clinically, a lot of the time I will drop patients from a video virtual visit and change them over to a phone visit, because they just cannot get the technology to work. And what happens is, as much as they get sent information ahead of time and get told about it, there's really no ability to do it. And then once you try to do it, you're sitting there waiting 10 minutes to try and get on this video visit. And I end up I honestly give up 30 seconds into it, call them, and then now the quality of the care is decreased, the billing for that case is decreased. So it's a big problem.
So would you say, Marty, that it's worth looking at a kind of a white glove triage for those? You couldn't do it for everyone, to your point, Joshua, right? That's a huge population, but for the ones that you can risk score.
Yeah.
It's almost like doing a clinical intervention, but for a technical nuance, right?
I think you would use, the way I was thinking about it is that you would use, similar to what I used as far as health maintenance, with an overdue as far as a digital trigger. If you had a patient that was stratified and based off of Johns Hopkins, like they kind of looked at it, and they stratified based on the patient had not had a virtual visit in the last 3 months, had not had some sort of e-check-in or patient portal experience with their existing patient portal. As far as discrete criteria, those patients were stratified. And if you had a patient, let's just say on a score of 0 to 4, if you had a patient that had a score of 4, identifying that patient, and then from there giving that recommendation for a stronger a stronger form of patient outreach ahead of time, so that your providers are not having the failures that they're having, which is what Dr. Knowles articulated. If there's ways of doing some of that, or like via, I think Johns Hopkins moved to like SMS messaging to say, hey, you look like you might be in trouble as far as needing extra assistance. can we provide that to you? Here's our number, even as a starting point. Something like that might be better than, and long-term potentially providing like a white glove service 24 hours in advance for those patients. I just think it would go a long way to helping alleviate some of the undue burden that's put on our clinical care teams and some of the failures with issues, technical issues.
I was going to say, my parents, when they have a physical visit with a new doctor, the week before they get in the car, they drive, they practice it, they do it at the time, they see what the traffic looks like, and they test it out and go visit before they actually have the appointment.
Yeah.
Right. The same thing needs to happen on the virtual side so that they understand exactly what they're doing. It's as simple as they don't understand the platform they need. If they're going to do it on their cell phone, do they have a smartphone? Does it have a camera on it? If it's a computer, yes, they have a computer, but does it have a camera on it? Are they connected to the internet? I mean, a lot of these things, I'm a vascular surgeon, so I probably see the worst of it. My average age is, probably 75 to 80. And these are a lot of people in, Eastern North Carolina who just aren't very technically savvy. And so it'd be a huge opportunity.
Yeah, Martyn, I was just thinking, how do we get them to do a practice run, practice visit? And I'm starting to think, Jason, around the idea of chat bots, conversational AI. If we have access, Martyn and Josh, to what Zoom number it is, or all those types of details, and then we can actually walk the patient through it, guide them through it step by step, and it's there for them to do it over and over again if they need to, something like that.
Yeah, I think the mode can be in a number of different ways, right? I think it probably would have to be multi-channel, omni-channel type of scenario for different demographics. But the key here, hearing is, we need a way of aggregating, normalizing, and sanitizing that data so it could be a risk score, and then automating that next step so an omni-channel can drive it. And then I think everything else is operational acumen. I mean, to your point, my parents are the same way. They told me they had an appointment and they couldn't get the camera working. If there was a nurse who had contacted them in advance, start up the call, got the logistics running, and then warm transferred them to the physician, you only need to do that once. Then afterwards, it probably isn't an issue again because the lesson learned. That would have been a much better experience on the long term. But now the next appointment is going to go just as bad. Right.
Well, and to your point too, Jason, the problem is that you're relying on nurses, MAs, and doctors to do that technical work when they should be focused on clinical care. And that's the biggest issue, is that the undue burden put on our clinical care teams to become IT experts, as opposed to focusing on the actual care of the patient, is really one of those things that I think has impacted the overall outlook or enthusiasm about virtual care visits. It's just like giving a flu shot. As a nurse, I have to do 15 minutes of work to do 1 second of a flu shot. I hate flu shots because of that, but it's very important. Same thing with a virtual care visit. It's great for everybody and everybody's enthusiastic about it. But if you're tacking on 5 to 10 minutes of failure or frustration, and you're compounding that over the course of your average day of seeing patients, that then becomes less palatable.
Well, I think on top of that, we've seen clinically a gigantic increase, and maybe this is another opportunity, gigantic increase in the number of calls coming into our clinic that nurses have to sort through and answer, just because of the passage of the availability to see everything in your electronic medical record. Hey, I looked back 6 months ago and my BUN was this. Can you tell me what that means? And people comb through it and look for things. And our nurses are stuck with a huge number of calls. Our number of calls have gone up threefold since before that happened. And it's bogging them down, not to mention how many we're losing because everybody's having staffing issues everywhere. It has to be automated. It can't be, it sounds great to say, hey, I'll have the nurse or the MA get on and trial it out and they can run through the meds the day before or 2 hours ahead of time. Well, that's 30 to 45 minutes that they're taking away from all the other things they do. It has to be automated.
Yep.
I think, a combination of the scorecard and a chat bot doing the warm welcome. So you do the scorecard, to kind of evaluate where the patient is in technology and in severity of care as well. But then also schedule the appointment 5-10 minutes sooner, have the chat bot be the initiator of the call to the patient, and then walk them through all of the testing. Can you hear? Can you see? Is everything good? Okay, we're going to place you on hold, stay here, and then the physician can join that call. So I think there is a stepped approach that could be used for that. And same with the phone calls, to the office, just making sure you get some, automation in your phone systems to allow routing and different responses for that.
Yeah, I'm looking at the details of the rule that Hopkins and Stanford and other folks have used to sort of trigger this queue of when they reach out to families proactively before telehealth. And it's 3 rules. It's does not have an active portal account, has needed an interpreter, or has some other language besides English as the preferred language, and has not completed telehealth visit in the past 90 days. Like, it's a simple rule to identify, I think, the bulk of the patients. I guess my question is, and maybe there's a question for Jason, but can the RPA process actually complete a video test run with the family, or can it just point them to a link saying, please prove that this can actually work?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be either of the above, depending on how you want to drive it, right? I mean, I don't, the goal here is not to make it something highly complex, right?
Right.
It's really going to be about the disparity of the information to feed those 3 rules. And the next action, if it's coordinating an outreach IVR system to push a transaction because there's no good API to drive it, perfect use case. We actually have a hospital system close to you, Bimal, that did this for COVID outreach testing because they were getting inundated with people calling in for COVID test results. So same thing. They used the rule set. They had the EMR for the work list. They had Salesforce for the CRM, and they had Twilio as the IVR, and they used UiPath to sync all 3 of those together because there was no way to do it. There's 186,000 clinical hours they saved in 3 months. Those people went and gave people the inoculations in the tent for the first round of vaccines. So I would say the more integrated the system is, the less you need automation, the more disparate that is across your platforms, the more automation is going to be required to tie those applications together.
I think that's an important point to convey. Like when you start going to talk to health systems, because my reaction is someone who's naive to a lot of these tools is, well, we can do that with Twilio, well, we can do that with Epic Reports, well, we can do that with whatever. And I think the point that you're making is that you need something like a robotic orchestrator to actually coordinate all these different things, like identify the patient from an Epic report, trigger the Twilio message, send a notice to the scheduler, this patient's going to have trouble, make sure they have an interpreter, like all those separate steps needs some high level orchestration.
Yeah, composability, definitely. I mean, what would the human be? They would do the same thing, right? That's what was happening.
That's exactly what we're doing. We have 3 full-time digital health navigators, and that's their job. So look through the queue in the access center, figure out which patients are going to trigger that rule, and reach out to them ahead of the visit.
Yep. So
we're probably going to hire a 4th at some point.
Well, they could work together and see if you can avoid hiring the 4th and optimize the 3 that you have down to 2, and let them do the pre-visits.
And I have to jump for a 4 o'clock.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Josh, I'll try to get some time and get back with you. I'd love to drill into this a little bit more, and let's kind of see what we can get our hands around, and what kind of practical things can we start pulling together, if you don't mind.
Certainly, yeah. Excellent meeting, everybody. Thank you so much for your time.
That's great. Yep. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for having us.